Hello, everyone. Happy 4th of July holiday weekend. This is Citizen Speaks, and I'm going to do another video. Hopefully, you will like it and you will express your preference or liking, by clicking on that button that has that name, like. And then if you subscribe, that will even be more encouraging for me to continue doing these broadcasts. So, this time it's called a history lesson, and there are two quotes that it begins with. The first one is, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." That's by George Santayana, philosopher, writer, uh, Spanish philosopher, writer. And the other one is a little bit more tongue in cheek, but that's appropriate for the author. "History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme." That's Mark Twain. So, reading Gyula Szekfű's Hungarian history of late 15th and early 16th century Hungary up to 1526 and the Battle of Mohács compels a comparison of those terrible times to ours. It is hard to summarize what happened in 15th century Europe, and without unfair simplification. Let it suffice to say that there's a parallel between the struggles of this region's kings, princes, and feudal lords and those taking place at the time in France, Spain, the German lowlands, and England. The principal actors by the middle of the century were the Habsburg Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III and later his son Maximilian I, the Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus, or Mátyás in Hungarian, Casimir IV, the Jagiellonian Polish king, and his relative Vladislav I, the Czech king. The ascendant Habsburgs ruled much of Austria from their seat in Vienna and many of the Bavarian and other German principalities. The Holy Roman Empire, which according to Voltaire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, was a medieval quasi-alliance of German kings and princes and its emperor who, if he was strong and wily, had a lot of influence on the fate of Central Europe. In the conflict with Frederick III, Matthias conquered much of Austria, including Vienna, the seat of Frederick's kingdom. By this time, Matthias was unhealthy and he died in 1490. That ended 32 years of rule during which he had succeeded in making Hungary a powerful kingdom, vying for control of the region with the Habsburgs. Like his father, János Hunyadi, the victor at the 1456 Battle of Belgrade, or Nándorfehérvár in Hungarian, he prevented the northward expansion of the Ottoman Empire, defending the Hungarian kingdom's southern region, which included Croatia, Slavonia, and Serbia. These were ruled by princes or bonds who were lieges of the Hungarian king. The story turns desperately bad after Matthias's death. The Hungarian magnates, a handful of whom owned much of the kingdom's land, became embroiled in a struggle for succession that was settled when they chose the weak Jagiellonian king Vladislav II instead of the Habsburg Maximilian I. They wanted a king whom they could dominate, in stark contrast to Matthias, under whom their powers were curbed, forcing them to serve the interests of the Hungarian kingdom. Their choice of Vladislav sealed the fate of the kingdom. He was known in Hungarian as Ulászló, or Dobře László, since he responded to most requests with the Polish word dobrze, which means good. After more than 2 decades of wrangling between the weak king and noble magnates, Matthias's concentration of power was dispelled so that when Suleiman II attacked from the south in 1526 at Mohács, he defeated the armies of Lajos II, Vladislav II's son and successor. Escaping from the field of battle, Lajos drowned in a marsh, precipitating a lengthy period of constant contention for the throne of Hungary. The defeat at Mohács began the 150-year division of the Hungarian kingdom. The Ottoman Empire controlled the central third of the country from as far north as Buda, the one-time seat of the king, down south to the Sava River, and then in the east to the border of Transylvania, and west of the Danube as far as the fortress of Szigetvár. Since the kings of Hungary had built fortresses throughout the land over the centuries to defend against foreign invaders, these now served as centers of conflict with the Ottomans. There developed an ongoing struggle for these border fortresses where large groups of roving fighters harassed the invading Mohammedans. The end of the story had lasting effects on the country of Hungary. Not only was it torn into three parts for 150 years during the Ottoman occupation, but it never regained the authority and respect that it commanded under Matthias Corvinus. The beginning of Hungary's decline into today's small East Central European country can be traced to the infighting that followed the death of the last exceptionally gifted, strong king. What are the lessons for us today from this brief recounting of a dismal history from a distant land? As usual, parallels must be handled cautiously so that we will avoid drawing them directly. But there are symptoms which are reminiscent of those events in the 15th and early 16th century. We are witnessing a deterioration of political life in the US. On one side, we have a rising socialist communist cabal which encompasses some wealthy capitalist magnates who want to be members of a new global power elite. The number of people in this group is not large, but the money at their disposal is in inverse proportion to that number. On the other side are most other people, ranging from the moderately well-off middle class to the impoverished underclass, which is mostly a creation of the socialist capitalists. The tensions that these divisions create are like those that undermined the Hungarian kingdom in the beginning of the 16th century. The comparison is meant as a reminder that no society is immune from distortions and the subversion of dangerous ideas. The most successful in history have been brought down by social maladies which destroyed the foundations of their success. As Alexis de Tocqueville warned in 1835, majority rule could decay into dictatorship. Excuse me, I want to avoid coughing, so I have to take a little drink. He recognized, meaning Tocqueville, recognized, as had the American founding fathers, the dangers of democracy as opposed to a republic in which the rights of the minority are protected, and the power of the majority is circumscribed by various legislative limitations, and most of all by a division of power. It is in the later two categories where we have gone awry. We have legislatures which have relinquished their authority to experts, and thus regulations govern much of our lives instead of laws. Sometimes the later even supersede the former. We also have allowed the concentration of power in the executive branch of government to the detriment of the legislative and the judiciary. Since the executive is run by bureaucrats to whom presidents have delegated enormous power, the country is subservient to these unelected officials. These arrangements are replicated at the state and local government levels, to the point that the country is in effect run by bureaucrats. Interestingly, bureaucrats ran and were the undoing of Imperial Russia under the Romanovs and in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy under the Habsburg at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th. Contrary to misconceptions, these servants of the state tended to be liberal in 19th century terms, so they were not so different from our bureaucrats today. There were many famous novels by Russians, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, among others, Austrians and Central Europeans, including Robert Musil, Yaroslav Hasek, and Joseph Conrad, who of course was a Pole and ended up writing in English, which provided descriptions of the machinations of bureaucrats that foreshadowed the deterioration of those empires. Sorry, I can't talk this long and not dry out my throat. Their successors adopted bureaucratic governance and perfected it to achieve unknown levels of terror. Those aberrant agents of the state were best described by the Russian author Mikhail Bulgakov in writings like his most famous novel, The Master and Margarita. That book provides some of the most surrealistic metaphors for life under Stalinist terror and is a useful introduction to what we may expect in this country if politics continues to develop along present lines. The lesson of these historical peregrinations is that we must never let our guards down against those who govern us. Just because they are paraded as elected representatives, we should not trust them unless they earn that trust. They're not innately better than dictators or kings who gain power with that election, since they're all both human. As such, they can perpetrate every kind of good and evil. Finally, the similarities between Renaissance Hungary and other European kingdoms and our times are not as distant as they may seem. The struggle between Hungarian aristocrats and the king was partially settled by signing Hungary's Golden Bull, an agreement like the English Magna Carta. These documents limited the powers of the king and were the precursors of our constitution. In Hungary, the Golden Bull in effect allowed the magnates and the minor nobility to have some say in who was to be the king. Thus, they contributed to the choice of Matthias Corvinus, not knowing at the time how exceptionally smart and strong the 14-year-old was. They expected to control and manipulate him at their will, but were quickly disabused of such notions as the young king, merely a boy in our terms, consolidated his authority quickly by curbing his uncle Michael Szilágyi, the regent, and his powers. Without detailing the many successes of Matthias, who vied for the position of Holy Roman Emperor with Frederick III, third son Maximilian, and was the first non-Italian European king to support the flourishing of Renaissance art, music, and literature, it is what happened after his death that requires the comparison to our confused times. The lords he had curbed sought and achieved their vengeance. They regained their power and unintentionally caused the demise of the kingdom. They were like the oligarchs in our country today, the ones who control the media, including in its traditional and newer forms, who finance and manipulate the largest corporations in the country and who hold political leaders at all levels in their hands by controlling their purse strings. Just like the magnates in Hungary, they are confronted by the lesser nobility in this country, the medium-sized and smaller enterprises, and a sizable portion of the better-informed middle class. The conflict rages between these groups through the dissemination of information which is used to lead and mislead its consumers. Behind these facades are the well-entrenched bureaucrats who, like their Renaissance cousins, at the royal court, controlling the wealth and interests of the monarchy, run the machinery of power. Unfortunately, the external forces are also similar. Instead of the Ottoman Empire threatening 16th century Hungary, the US confronts China, which has developed its international business-based empire and is doing everything in its power to unseat us as the world leader since the Second World War. The European Union and Russia are like the Holy Roman Empire and the Habsburgs in the 16th century, harassing and distracting us, trying to whittle away our authority, which we are willfully diminishing in the hands of weak and ineffectual leaders. How we may avoid a fate like that of Hungary after 1526 is hard to project. It depends much on choosing a leader capable of preventing these floods from inundating our country. A leader able to organize the forces, aware of these threats, and willing to unite in the struggle against them. As leaders at any time in history, this one must represent the will of his followers and lead them in overcoming the negative forces which have overtaken our country. We must work hard and pray to make that happen and convince the Almighty that it is worthwhile to help us. That is it for today. I thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Again, have a happy 4th of July holiday, celebrating our country's independence and birth. And if you liked what you heard, please click the like button, or better yet, even subscribe and encourage me to continue. Thanks again, and all the best. Till the next time.